Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We know that there still exist challenges for some people to get to the park, so we want to continue bringing the park to you through our in-person tours, as well as our series of virtual programs, longer 45-minute in-detail programs, as well as our 15-minute more casual weekly walks. Thank you for joining us today for a weekly walk titled Visitor Center to Visitor Center with me, Ryan, on March 9th, 2022. As you may have guessed from the title of today's weekly walk, we're going to be taking you to all of the 5 visitor centers scattered throughout Central Park, and we'll touch a little bit on the history and how they really existed and came to the park. We're going to be together for about 15 minutes, and just about all the photos you're going to see were taken by myself here in Central Park over the last week. You will see a handful of photos that I did access through various databases, including the Museum of the City of New York, as well as the Central Park Conservancy's photo archives and the New York Public Library's photo archives. Now, as we begin our walk today, I do want to thank you again for joining us and supporting us here at the Central Park Conservancy. We're the nonprofit that cares for the park, and our mission is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. As always, we're using Zoom, so please use the chat feature to say hello and let us know where you're joining us from, and use the Q&A feature to ask any questions you might have. My colleague Jose will be on the back end answering any questions. And lastly, you'll see a few visitor polls launched throughout the tour today. And as I launch those, feel free to vote in them, and then I'll share the results once everybody has voted. As we begin our walk today, we are going to be covering a lot of ground. So for those that plan on walking this route later in the next coming week or so, be prepared for about 3 miles or more of walking, as we're going to be starting down here around 59th Street and traveling all throughout the park as we make our way up to the midsection, and then finally end at the very northern end of Central Park, stopping by all 5 visitor centers and one other little bonus stop that I included along the way. Now, as we begin our walk, we're starting down on 59th Street and Columbus Circle, right along Central Park West, otherwise known as 8th Avenue. As we start over here, we're entering a very popular and busy entrance to the park, one that's known as Merchant's Gate, and one that offers us some beautiful views of different types of statues and architecture, like the main monument to our right. However, we're here to look at something a little different. We're here to look at a visitor center that we have that exists down here at 59th Street, known as the Columbus Circle Information Kiosk. This very small little kiosk serves as one of the first welcomes visitors might have as they enter Central Park along the southern end. As we stop by, we can say hello to Carolyn, one of our VSRs, who is standing guard here in the kiosk, serving free maps for visitors, providing directions, insight, as well as manning the little information kiosk and gift shop that exists here. As we explore through some of the visitor centers, we'll notice how some of them have little gift shops, including the dairy, which houses all of Central Park's signature products. As we look to the future and the past, we can see some of the fun little events that occur here. Typically being one of the most busy entrances to the park, we'll also find different events like the Columbus Circle Holiday Market, which transformed this area into a very magical holiday season landscape. Areas decked with certainly a lot of Christmas lights and adding a little bit of color to the otherwise wintry season. As we leave this Columbus Circle kiosk behind, we can say goodbye to Carolyn and our other VSRs who helped to hand out free maps and information, and make our way to our next visitor center. As we make our way through the park, we'll pass by a few fun little features along the way. So as we start jumping up about 5 to 8 blocks or so, we'll pass by things like the wonderful little carousel, which even on a gloomy day is adding a little bit of color and sound to our walk. And as we pass through the appropriately matching Playmates arch, we'll come through to our next visitor centers. Coming through that archway, which is like a transitionary tunnel or a portal, bringing us to our next location, a visitor center that sits just atop a pretty large rock. Traveling up the stairs, we can come to what our next visitor center is, one that is known as Chess and Checkers House. Chess and Checkers House was installed here around 1952, and appropriately, it matches the same style of architecture that we would see in the carousel, as well as Playmates Arch, which we just walked by and through. Coming up to Chess and Checkers House, we can look to the past of what this once was. This area would have been a little different in the past, serving originally as a large wooden structure known as the Kinderberg. We can actually see a wooden pergola installed out here today that pays tribute to what this landscape once looked like, which was something like this. The largest of the rustic structures that ever existed in Central Park existed right here. The Kinderberg is a German term meaning child's play mountain, and it housed a bunch of different wooden picnic tables, some that were smaller and more children-sized, and offered a fun little area for kids or caretakers to rest and play as they enter Central Park. Unfortunately, this would be torn down around the 1950s as that wood would deteriorate over time. And unfortunately, we would not see much, this being really constructed or cared for over the years. So it would be torn down in the 1950s and eventually replaced in 1952 by the Chess and Checkers building we have today. During that time, we'd see about 24 of these chess tables being set along the outside of the building, allowing people to bring their own chess or rent out Chess and Checkers pieces from Chess and Checkers to play out here on these beautiful mosaic tables. During the 1980s, we at the Central Park Conservancy would do a restoration of this landscape, helping to bring back that wisteria pergola that surrounds the building, adding a little bit of shade and color and a little bit of a remembrance as to what once existed here, the Kinderberg. As we also look to past events, we can look at some of the really amazing different types of events that occur here, like chess simul's. Here we can see a photo from Zach Nelson, which shows Grandmaster Sabina Boiser during a chess simul in 2019. This photo coming from our Photo Conservancy archives. As we move a little bit beyond Chess and Checkers, we can come to our next visitor center, which sits very close by, one that we've visited in the past before, and one that recently underwent a wonderful restoration. What we're coming up to here is the Dairy Visitor Center. The Dairy Visitor Center certainly looking very beautiful, having a lot of that restoration work becoming very apparent, especially after the little bit of rain, which is contrasting and adding a little bit of deeper color to the Manhattan schist that this building is constructed from. We can see some of the new masonry that was repointed, a lot of the cleaning, of course, that was done, and the restoring of that beautiful wooden loggia just outside. We can also see some nice little landscaping that occurred, which is going to make this area immaculate during the spring as some of these new shrubs start blooming. We can also look to the past of what the dairy used to look like, very similar to what it looks like now post its recent restoration, which was just completed in 2021. We can see the dairy, which originally opened in 1871, being created by Calvert Vaux and serving really as a Victorian cottage, serving milk, as you may have guessed from its name, to caretakers and children, as well as renting out toys for them to play with at the nearby Kinderberg and the small low-lying lawns just along the side. As we look to the past around the 1970s and 80s, this is the condition we would have found the dairy in, having that big, beautiful wooden loggia deteriorate and be taken down, much like the Kinderberg was. This would actually be one of the first restorations by the Central Park Conservancy, being restored around the early 1980s, bringing that loggia back to life. We would also see this being the first visitor center in Central Park, coming around 1979. And of course, today we have a lot of beauty, both in the outside as well as the inside. The more recent restoration would include an accessible entrance, allowing more people to experience the dairy. And as we step inside, we can see the dairy houses the largest gift shop and collection in the park. Now, some people might wonder why there are gifts sold in Central Park, but Central Park has really kind of transcended beyond what it originally was created for. And today a park means so much and so many different things to so many people. I, for one, love visiting national parks. And when I stop at national parks, I always stop at the gift shop so I can get my collectible pins and park book stamp. So you can imagine people visiting Central Park from all over the world would love to get something to remember their visit here. And not only does it offer somebody something to take back and remember their trip, it also all goes back to caring for the park, because everything purchased from any of the shops operated by the Central Park Conservancy all go back to caring for the park and keeping the park looking beautiful. As we venture through the dairy, you can see some of the beautiful inside interior that was recently restored. Say hello to Raphael, who is helping out one of the visitors of the dairy, providing again free maps, insight, and maybe allowing them to take home a fun souvenir to remember their trip. We can also see some images of the dairy post and after restoration inside. As we move past the dairy, we can start making our way now to the midsection of the park, traveling up and passing by some fun sites like Bethesda Terrace, as well as the Ramble, my favorite landscape. As we start to make our way up to the mid area of the park, I want to launch a poll, which is, which visitor centers have you had the opportunity to visit? You'll also notice I included one on there that is not a visitor center, but one that I think deserves an honorable mention. As we make our way up, we come to yet another visitor center, arguably the most whimsical, Belvedere Castle. Belvedere Castle we visited in the past, and we won't have time to go over its full history today, but you can find past weekly walks that'll enlighten you on a little bit of its history, like a more recent weather station walk we did in the area. As we come up to the Belvedere Castle Plaza, we start getting the sun coming out, shining and illuminating this absolutely beautiful visitor center. We can also enjoy the beauty of this visitor center, which went through a recent restoration, and see how far it's come. This is what Belvedere Castle once looked like in the 1980s as the Central Park Conservancy was forming. Many areas of the park were just destroyed. The architecture and masonry, like we can see here, was damaged. The wall blocking off a very big drop off of the Belvedere Castle viewing point was pretty much non-apparent, as we can see, as well as covered in graffiti. Belvedere Castle would undergo a few restorations. Beyond the recent 2019 restoration, this would actually be another first restoration by the Conservancy here in the park around 1983. During that time, of course, a lot of this was fixed, but of course, a lot of damage occurred even over time. We would see some original structures of Belvedere being lost early on, even within the first 20 years of its construction, like this little tower we can see just sticking off the left side of this small pavilion. This was a recent restoration addition that was brought back, part of the original design of Belvedere that was lost back in the 19th century. Beyond having a beautiful stone plaza and some of these returning designs, we can certainly enjoy Belvedere Castle's most prized views as we walk up the very narrow little staircase. Coming up this staircase, it is one way at a time, so we do want to use the mirrors up top as we're visiting to make sure we don't run into anybody. But luckily that rain kept a lot of people away, so we have some of these viewing towers to ourselves. And as we look over on some of the towers, we can enjoy the beautiful views that Belvedere giving us the highest point and highest view that we can get in Central Park. Looking over that top area, we can see a beautiful view of the surrounding Turtle Pond, the nearby Great Lawn, and of course, look down on that plaza to get an idea of just how high up in the park we've come, just from walking up 2 short floors. And as we come up to Belvedere Castle, start making our way down, we can also enjoy the view that we can get from the first floor. Even if you're in a wheelchair, a stroller, or can't make it up the tight, narrow staircase, you can certainly enjoy the beautiful view from the inside of Belvedere Castle looking out the windows. As we start to make our way downstairs, we can also find another small little gift shop in here, one that offers, again, some fun little souvenirs and products to remember your stay here in the park. As we start to leave Belvedere Castle, we're going to make our way to our last final stops, our last visitor center or two. And as we make our way up, I do want to share the results. And it looks like most people have had an opportunity to make it by most of them. Chess and Checkers and North Meadow, it looks like, are probably the 2 least visited. And we'll actually see Chess and Checkers and our next stop, which is going to be North Meadow, being closed for a little while. Those are going to be undergoing some restorations similar to the dairy. So we probably won't see those buildings opening back up until about 2023 to 2024. You can certainly look on our website and keep up to date on those restoration projects as they occur. But we're really excited to have some new visitor centers coming to the park, having a little bit more updated technology and servicing a lot more people. As we start to make our way up, I will launch another poll in just a little bit, but as we make our way to our final stops, we can pass by some of the other beauty along the way, such as the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir, which we just visited the other week or so, as well as make our way up a little bit past that and through the tennis court areas just north of the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. Not much use today, even though it feels a little bit warmer as we've been walking around as the sun's coming out. But certainly today we're getting that cold returning. And if you're in New York, you might be noticing some of the snow that we are getting at the moment. As we continue walking past, we come to our next stop, which is technically not a visitor center, but one that sort of serves as a visitor center from time to time, and one that I thought was something we should at least honorably mention. It's the North Meadow Recreation Center. North Meadow Recreation Center was built in the 20th century and was originally created really as a maintenance building. It would later be used as stables for horses, but eventually would be rebuilt and expanded several times over its existence. As we come up here, we can see some of the basketball courts, as well as a small little white door on the right that will often serve as an office we have here. This is, again, another building that, like Chess and Checkers, will be closed as it undergoes a restoration until about 2024. But often, you can stop by this small white door on the right to get some free maps, as well as rent out some free basketballs to use on the courts nearby, or lawn kits to use and play games on some of the nearby meadows. Of course, if you do bring your own basketballs, handballs, or tennis equipment, you can come up here and certainly enjoy these different facilities and courts on your own. As we look around, we do have about four or so actually courts just outside here for full basketball courts that can be utilized, as well as in the back side, where we'll see upwards of about 9 different types of handball or racquetball courts. Of course, a lot of people coming to practice handball, racquetball, or maybe even practice tennis against some of the unused walls here. But really a lot of fun recreation that we can find at this building, which certainly gets a lot of use and which will be open this summer for the youth basketball clinics. So those interested in studying up and honing in on their basketball skills in the park, especially younger kids, can look for those youth basketball clinics that are going to be occurring this summer and will be some of the last events to occur before North Meadow undergoes its upcoming restoration project. As we make our way past this, technically not a visitor center, but honorable mention, we are going to come to our last visitor center. And as we make our way up, I want to launch our last poll, one that's pretty simple. And this one is, what do you think is the only planned visitor center for Central Park? We're seeing about 5 or 6 visitor centers. There's really, again, technically 5 visitor centers in Central Park, but I'm showing you North Meadow as an extra. But which of these 5 do you think is the only one that was created as a visitor center? I'll let everybody vote in that, and we'll continue up to make our way to our last visitor center on our walk today. On our walk up, coming through the northern stretches of the park, we get to pass by the North Meadow Recreation Center that houses North and East Meadow and all of the wonderful baseball diamonds and large open meadows that encourage recreation. You can also see in the middle of this baseball diamond, it looks like 3 geese that have walked across a path, adding a fun little footmark print along. But as we make our footprint path through the park and travel up north, we can make our way to the Harlem Mere, one of the most beautiful water bodies in the park, one that certainly gets a lot of community interaction as it brings a lot of local New Yorkers to the park to utilize this beautiful pond and lake, rather, mere being a Dutch word for lake, utilizing it for viewing of wildlife like the mallards we can see here, fishing, or even just having a beautiful view to sit along and read. As we make our way up, we come to our last visitor center on the tour today. This is the Charles A. Dana Center. And as we come up here, I'd like to end that poll that I just shared, or that I just launched, and share the results. And we have actually everybody voting for the Columbus Circle Information Kiosk. That is a very good guess, but it's actually not the correct answer. Believe it or not, the Columbus Circle Information Kiosk was actually not originally created for an information center, it actually originally was a coffee shop that we were able to take over and really turn into a little information booth. But it actually wasn't originally created with the intention of being a visitor center. That answer actually is the Charles A. Dana Center, which we have just arrived to. We're coming to the only building here in the park that was created with the intention of being a visitor center, making it placed right along about 5th Avenue and 110th Street. So right as you enter the park, you come to this building. Very appropriate for a visitor center, as most of the other visitor centers today are located deep inside the park, making you have to typically get lost to discover them. So as we come up here, we can come to, again, the only planned visitor center for the park, which was the Charles A. Dana Center that we can learn a little bit about right now. Charles A. Dana Center looking especially beautiful as the sun is coming out. A really transformative day, as it started as almost rainy and overcast, and now we have the sun shining. We have beautiful views along the Harlemere, plenty of wildlife and people coming out, and of course, beautiful views of this almost Victorian style, kind of like a Japanese boathouse visitor center building. The Charles A. Dana Center would make its way to the park around 1993, again, coming as the only intended visitor center. Inside of this visitor center, much like the others, you can find a small little gift shop, as well as some helpful visitor center representatives like Peter on the left and Chris on the right, who we can see here, helping visitors that stop in the North End, giving free maps, as well as offering some of the wonderful pieces of free equipment that you can get from the Charles A. Dana Center. Pictured on the left, discovery kits, backpacks featuring child-sized binoculars, magnifying glass, nature guides, and other fun things like colored pencils for you to do activities and drawings throughout the park. On the right, you can see some of the different lawn games that are free to rent here at the Charles A. Dana Center. So if you'd like to play horseshoe, cornhole, or lawn bowling, you can come up and rent these games for free to play on some of the nearby lawns and landscapes. Another thing we can often see found in the Charles A. Dana Center, which unfortunately is closed at the moment, is going to be a little gallery space that hopefully we'll see returning to public use in the near future. This little gallery space, which we can see just a small portion of here, will tell you a little bit about the park's history, as well as its geology, its Civil War and Revolutionary War history, as well as give you beautiful views of the surrounding landscape. We can see some comparative and contrasting pictures here that help to educate us, as well as offer us an actual physical look at the landscape that exists just outside of the window. Looking out the large windows in this gallery room, we can see the surrounding Harlemere, which is again a Dutch word for lake, as well as the beautiful Manhattan schist extending out of the park. Much of that schist we can see being used for visitor centers like the Dairy and Belvedere Castle. One last thing we can enjoy out here in the Dana Center is a beautiful small little balcony area that takes us over the Harlemere. One that we're not allowed to use to go fishing off of, but one that we can come and afford a beautiful view of the surrounding area, which again is looking immaculate now that the sun is shining. And as we come here to the Dana Center, we come to, again, the only planned visitor center, one that would actually be created in the 1990s as a part of the restoration of this beautiful Harlemere that we're looking over. As we come to the end of this walk, I'd like to thank you again for joining us on this very long walk as we start all the way at the very end of the park at 59th, making our way up to 110th Street, seeing all of the 5 visitor centers throughout the park, as well as one that's not technically a visitor center, but one that I thought we should mention. As we come to an end, I want to again thank you for your support of us here at the Central Park Conservancy. We, of course, are going to continue doing virtual programs like these weekly walks and larger in-depth 45-minute virtual tours, but we also have plenty of other ways to get involved in the park, like in-person tours. And we, of course, are always offering ways to maybe provide a tour for somebody else, like a gift certificate, which are offered year-long, never expire, and can be used for any of our tours, whether they be seasonal or regularly occurring. And of course, we have so many wonderful tours coming up. We are launching a lot of really amazing new specialty tours. It is currently Women's History Month, and yesterday was International Women's Day. And we will be launching a series of Hidden History Women in Central Park, which will be starting in about a week and a half. We're going to have both virtual as well as in-person offerings for those tours. So please keep a lookout for those. We're also going to have wonderful regular tours continue to be offered. Like tomorrow, Belvedere Beautiful View will be a tour that I'll be leading if anybody would like to join me. And of course, plenty of other different seasonal tours coming up as we approach Olmsted's 200th birthday in April. So please check the chat box to see some of the upcoming specialty programs and regular offerings that we have available. And of course, continue to join us on more weekly walks and hopefully in-person programs as well. As we come to the end of the walk, I will leave this chat room open for a little bit longer in case there are any last-minute questions that we can answer. But I want to thank you for joining us. And of course, remind you that the park does need us and we need the park. So what is it about Central Park that you need the most? We'd love to have you let us know using the hashtag #TheParkNeedsUs, and we might be able to feature it on some of our social media channels. So thank you again for joining us and for caring about the park. Again, I'll leave this open for a little bit longer in case we can answer any last-minute questions that you might have. But from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.